Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a huge stack of sourced knowledge. And in this case, it's an incredibly detailed collection of low-carb recipes, and we just pull out the essential insights.
Right.
We want to understand the mechanics underneath it all, not just, a list of ingredients. We're getting straight to the why of making low-carb cooking actually work.
And our mission today, it sounds simple, but it's really quite complex. We are decoding the absolute engineering required to run a low-carb kitchen without giving up on flavor or those comfort food textures we all crave.
Exactly.
This collection isn't just a list. It's more like a playbook for how to reconstruct everything. Rich sauces, desserts, even stable breads, while keeping a really tight grip on the carb count.
So the focus is on the swaps, the techniques.
Precisely. The specific ingredient swaps and the technical methods. The heat, the timing, the mixing, all the things that make sure these adaptations actually succeed for a real person cooking at home.
Absolutely. And when you look at just the sheer breadth of what's in here, it's impressive. I mean, we're talking about everything from gourmet almond poppy seed cheesecake to...
Grid machine recipes.
Yes, and things like blackened beef brisket, and even 2 different ways to make Alfredo sauce. So for you listening, our goal is to really synthesize the big picture substitution strategies. You should walk away knowing not just what to swap, but why it works on a chemical level.
That's the goal. We've sort of broken our analysis down into 4 key areas where low-carb engineering gets really tested. First, the chemistry of baking with nut flours. That's all about texture and structure.
Okay.
Second, the specialized techniques for making breads that are actually workable. Third, how to get maximum flavor in main courses without using starchy thickeners.
And the last one.
And finally, the art of building those stable, rich, high-fat sauces and condiments. So let's just jump right in where the challenge is the greatest. Baking and desserts.
Yeah, transitioning into desserts and baked goods is always the most fascinating place to start. This is really where traditional baking structure has a head-on collision with low-carb limits.
It really is.
And the dominant theme here is, well, it's pretty overwhelming. It's the substitution of flour and sugar with primarily almond flour or almond meal, and then a non-sugar sweetener, which is usually Splenda.
And that's the main takeaway right off the bat. Almond meal or flour is the absolute cornerstone of low-carb baking. We see it everywhere, in almost every sweet recipe.
Pound cakes, muffins.
Pound cakes, muffins, pancakes, rolls. It's the workhorse because it solves the single biggest structural problem you create when you take away wheat flour.
Okay, so let's unpack that technical role. I mean, wheat flour has gluten, right? That's what gives it elasticity, volume.
Yeah.
So how exactly does almond meal step in and create a reliable structure?
It's a fascinating switch. It achieves this through what we call a fat for structure substitution, so where gluten gets all stretchy and elastic when you add water and knead it. Almond meal, which is really just ground almonds, brings a ton more fat and protein to the table. This fat becomes the main binding agent, and crucially, it helps trap moisture.
Ah, so it stops it from being dry.
Exactly. Gluten is great at holding on to moisture, so without it, the high-fat content in the almond flour has to do that job. It mimics the richness and prevents that classic dryness you often get with low-carb baking.
And there's a pattern here, isn't there?
There is a very clear design principle. We see a common measure of 2 cups of ground almonds used over and over again. In the Almond Flour Pound Cake, the Almond Herbs Muffins, it suggests that 2 cups is sort of the critical mass you need for structural integrity in a standard cake pan.
Okay, speaking of structure, let's dive into those 2 pound cake recipes. They're a little different. The first one, the Almond Flour Pound Cake, is really illuminating. It's got half a cup of butter, half a cup of full-fat cream cheese, a cup of Splenda, 5 eggs, 2 cups of almond flour, and it specifically calls out 1 teaspoon of Calumet baking powder.
And that full-fat cream cheese, it's not just there for taste. It's a really profound strategy for moisture and richness. It acts as a superior emulsion stabilizer.
An emulsion stabilizer.
Yeah. In regular baking, the eggs and butter emulsify pretty easily with the flour. But with nut flour, which doesn't form that same network, the cream cheese helps bind all that fat from the butter with the liquid from the eggs.
It makes it smoother.
It makes it smoother, and it prevents the cake from getting greasy or drying out. And the fact that they specify Calumet baking powder suggests that the leavening speed of that specific brand is actually a critical part of the recipe's success with this dense flour.
Okay, now let's compare that to the second version, just called Almond Pound Cake. This one is simpler. It uses 8 ounces of butter, 8 ounces of Splenda, but it drops the cream cheese. It still has the 5 eggs and 2 cups of almonds, though.
This second version has a different goal for the texture. It doubles down on the butter and relies much more on just the egg and butter emulsion. But the key instruction here is that you have to process the almonds till texture is fine before you mix them in.
So the grind matters more here.
It's paramount. Because you don't have the structural support of the cream cheese, the particle size of the almond flour becomes the most important factor. If the grind is too coarse, your cake will be crumbly and fall apart. A fine grind gives you a tighter, denser crumb.
A trade-off, then. You lose some of the richness from the cream cheese, but you get a denser cake.
A slight trade-off, yes. It makes perfect sense. The structure of your flour is your foundation.
Okay, moving to muffins. Here we start to see other specialized ingredients coming into play. The almond muffins recipe brings in a full cup of vanilla whey protein powder alongside just 1 cup of almond flour.
This is a classic example of engineering for a dual benefit. You get flavor delivery and a structural boost. Well, by swapping half the almond flour for flavored whey protein, you're doing two things. First, you're obviously boosting the protein content, which is great for a low-carb diet. But second, whey protein is an excellent structural filler.
It helps it hold its shape.
Exactly. When you heat it, the protein denatures and helps set the batter. It gives you the dry volume you need for a muffin structure while also delivering that vanilla flavor without adding any sugary liquid flavorings.
And then we get a really interesting savory one, the almond herbs muffins. This one feels like a strong statement on using fat. It calls for 3/4 of a cup of bacon fat or drippings.
Oh, this is a very robust high-fat application. Using bacon drippings completely transforms the muffin from a sweet treat into a dense, savory, almost bread-like side.
And the fat provides the structure, just like butter would.
It provides the structure and lubrication, but it also brings this deep, smoky flavor that's then amplified by the oregano. It's a really efficient way to use up leftover cooking fat and create something incredibly flavor-forward.
Okay, let's shift to cheesecakes. Here, the techniques get even more refined to achieve a delicate texture. The almond cheesecake, for instance. It's unique because it uses a tiny amount, just 1 teaspoon of rice flour.
That little bit of rice flour is a fascinating sort of secret weapon. Rice flour doesn't have gluten, but it's super absorbent. In that small quantity, it's not adding many carbs, but it's acting as a very effective binder. It makes the whole thing smoother, less gritty.
But the real magic seems to be in how it uses the eggs, separating them, beating the whites stiff.
That's the true structural magic right there. It's all about aeration. By beating the egg white stiff, you're creating millions of stable air pockets. When you fold that gently into the dense cream cheese and almond mixture, you get lift. You get a lighter, airier texture.
It moves it from just a dense block of cream cheese to an actual cake.
Precisely. And that same technique is right there in the almond sponge roll, which calls for separating 8 large eggs. The goal is clearly volume and lightness. You fold the beaten whites into the yolk and almond mixture to create that airy sponge.
And the filling for that is mascarpone and ricotta.
A perfect pairing. The light, airy texture of the roll is balanced by that dense, rich, tangy Italian cheese filling. It delivers total satisfaction without needing any powdered sugar or heavy frosting.
The almond poppy seed cheesecake, though, that seems like a much bigger commitment. A 2-hour bake at 400 degrees.
That long, high-temperature bake is necessary for something so dense and high in fat. You've got 2 cups of cream cheese in there, 8 ounces of Splenda. That 2-hour bake allows the center to fully set without collapsing.
And what about that finishing technique? Spreading a hot topping on at the end.
That's the masterstroke. A hot topping of sour cream, Splenda, and almond extract is spread over the cheesecake while it's still hot, and then goes back in for just 5 minutes. That flash bake creates that signature, slightly crisp, creamy top crust, and, importantly, prevents the surface from cracking as it cools.
Let's talk about the quick fixes. The almond pancakes recipe is just shockingly simple. 1/2 cup of almond flour, 1/3 of a cup of seltzer water, and a tablespoon of heavy cream. That's it.
It's a brilliant example of ingenuity born from limitation. They need lift, but they don't have gluten and don't want to wait for baking powder.
So the seltzer water is for the bubbles.
Exactly. The dissolved carbonation provides instant leavening when it hits the hot griddle. It gives the pancake just enough puff to resemble a normal flapjack. The heavy cream adds the necessary fat for browning and richness.
And the apple cinnamon muffins have another really clever substitution.
Yes, instead of using actual apples, which would add a lot of sugar, they use 1 cup of soy protein that's already apple cinnamon flavored.
So you get the flavor profile without the carbs.
It's pure flavor engineering. You get that warm, spicy, autumnal flavor of apple pie, but you maintain rigid control over the macronutrients. It's incredibly efficient.
And finally, the almost fudge. This feels like the ultimate no-bake, high-fat recipe. Cream cheese, heavy cream, cocoa, peanut butter, Splenda.
This one is all about thermodynamics and saturated fat. There's no baking at all. You just melt the cream cheese and peanut butter in the microwave. It works because the high fat content in both of those ingredients naturally solidifies when it gets cold.
So it sets in the fridge or freezer.
Right. It gives you that dense, satisfying, fatty fudge texture without needing any binders like powdered sugar. It's simple, high reward, and almost no effort.
Okay, let's unpack this. Bread. For so many people on a low-carb diet, this is the single greatest challenge.
Yeah.
It's often the point of failure.
It really is.
You take away gluten and wheat, you're taking away the very thing that creates elasticity, chewiness, volume. We saw fat for structure in cakes. But how does this collection tackle the huge structural problem of making something airy, like bread?
Well, they have to move beyond just almond flour. They tackle this with a heavy reliance on specialty low-carb flour mixes, and this is crucial, high-protein additives that are designed to directly mimic what gluten does.
Like what?
Specifically, vital wheat gluten and various protein and fiber powders. These bread recipes are genuine engineering projects. The top priority is height and tensile strength.
Okay, let's start with a staple, Atkins garlic toast. The recipe uses 2 cups of Atkins bake mix, some Calumet baking powder, and club soda and eggs as the binder.
And that choice of club soda is critical. It's not just liquid, it's a quick-acting leavening agent. The carbonation gives you a fast lift in the oven, which you really need to compensate for the density of that proprietary mix.
And Atkins bake mix itself, what's in that?
It's essentially a pre-made structural scaffold. It's usually a blend of things like oat fiber, soy protein, and a certain amount of refined wheat, gluten, or protein isolate. They basically optimize the dry mix to do the heavy lifting for you.
But the technique for this toast is incredibly specific. It's a multi-stage process. You bake the loaf for an hour, cool it, slice it, brush it with garlic oil, and then you toast it again at a higher temperature.
And that multi-stage process is absolutely non-negotiable if you want the right result. The first bake at 350 is to set the protein and fiber structure on the inside. If you skip that, the whole thing would just collapse.
And the second toasting?
That's the real innovation. That high-heat toast at 400 degrees actively drives out any leftover moisture from that dense dough. If it stays moist, it feels gummy. By toasting it after slicing, they create a dry, crunchy toast texture that really does mimic traditional bread.
And they even give shelf life instructions. 3 days in the fridge, 2 months in the freezer. This is clearly meant to be a staple you make in batches.
Absolutely. Making low-carb bread is time-consuming, and the ingredients can be expensive, so batch cooking and freezing is just a necessary strategy for efficiency.
Now let's get into the real heart of the bread engineering. The 3 bread machine recipes. These really show off the specialized ingredients you need to get that classic loaf shape and chew.
The bread machine recipes are a masterclass in blending composite flours. In the best low-carb bread machine bread, the key structural trio is 3/4 of a cup of vital wheat gluten, a 1/4 cup of soy flour, and a 1/3 of a cup of ground flaxseed.
So vital wheat gluten is the star of the show.
It absolutely is. It's almost pure, isolated gluten protein. It's essential because it single-handedly provides the elasticity and chew that you're missing from nut flours. It's what allows the loaf to rise and hold that familiar bread shape.
So what are the soy flour and flaxseed doing then?
The soy flour is high in protein, so it acts as a secondary structural binder, and it also helps with browning. The ground flaxseed is fascinating. When it gets wet, it creates this sticky, gel-like substance, a mucilage, that acts as a fantastic binder and moisture retainer.
So it's like a natural gum.
A natural, fiber-rich way to get everything to stick together, yes.
Okay, the second one, the standard bread machine bread, uses a similar but slightly different mix. It's got more vital wheat gluten, some oat flour, and unflavored whey protein powder.
This blend is really prioritizing volume and a different kind of texture. You still have that heavy dose of gluten, but the oat flour gives it a specific, soft, almost spongy texture. It's very different from the density you get from soy or almond flour.
And the whey protein again.
Again, it's a structural filler and a protein boost. It absorbs moisture and sets quickly when it bakes. And notice this one specifically calls for rapid rise yeast. They're actively trying to speed up the whole process.
Then there's the bread machine European-style bread, which seems almost too simple. It's just a vital wheat, gluten-based flour, water, egg, butter, yeast, and Splenda.
This version strips everything back. It relies almost entirely on the robust structure that's guaranteed by that gluten-based flour blend. This is positioned as your foundational, less complex, low-carb loaf. It proves that if you nail the gluten concentration, you can simplify everything else and still get a decent product.
But the bread machine multi-grain bread is the opposite. It's the maximalist approach. It's got wheat bran, pecan meal, and flax seeds on top of the gluten and whey protein.
That is all about sensory replication. The goal there is to perfectly mimic the hearty feel, the texture, the flavor of a real multi-grain bread.
And it needs all those different meals and brands to do it.
Exactly. The wheat bran adds visible fiber, that grittiness. The pecan meal adds a rich, nutty fat component. And this recipe also provides instructions for making it by hand, with 2 rising periods and a very, very specific baking temperature, 308 degrees Fahrenheit.
308, that's oddly specific.
It's critical. That precise, low temperature ensures a slow, thorough bake that stops the high-protein, high-fat ingredients from scorching on the outside before the center is fully cooked.
It's just incredible how much technical complexity goes into replacing a simple cup of wheat flour.
It is. Every single ingredient is there to solve a specific structural or textural problem.
Okay, beyond loaves, there are also solutions for things like burger buns. And the recipe for these is fascinating. It uses cream cheese, eggs, buttermilk, and the Atkins bake mix.
This is a classic example of that fat and protein binder technique we saw in the cakes, but for a savory staple. This is essentially a cream cheese dough. The structure comes almost entirely from the proteins in the eggs and the stabilizing fat of the cream cheese.
And the buttermilk.
The buttermilk is crucial. The acid in it reacts with the baking powder or soda in the mix, and that guarantees you get enough lift. And the instruction to scoop just 1 or 2 tablespoons tells you these are small, dense, rich buns. They're a functional vehicle for a burger, not a big, airy traditional bun.
And finally, we see how all this engineering pays off in the Atkins crab cakes, which use fresh Atkins breadcrumbs instead of regular breading.
This really closes the loop. Once you've successfully engineered a workable low-carb bread, the crumbs from that bread become a direct low-carb replacement for the starchy binders and coatings you use in everything else.
Like meatloaf or crab cakes.
Exactly. It shows the utility of creating these staples that can then be used in other recipes.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, the main courses. They're often so heavy on sauces or sides that use flour, starches, or sugar, but these recipes, they manage to keep things low-carb while just maximizing flavor.
Indeed. This whole section is a study in fat maximization as a flavor delivery system and total starch avoidance. Let's start with the bacon-stuffed burgers.
Right.
The first strategy is just high fat. The base is half lean ground beef, half bulk pork sausage. That immediately gives you a high fat content and a complex flavor. And the binder, the Parmesan cheese.
And the filling bacon, onion, mushrooms is all sautéed in bacon drippings. The technique involves sealing that mixture inside the patties.
And that sealing technique is absolutely vital. By using Parmesan as a binder and trapping that moist, fatty filling inside, they make sure all that delicious flavor stays in the burger while it cooks. It guarantees a juicy burger.
Moving on to the blackened beef brisket. The recipe here is surprisingly simple. It's all about the seasoning, the browning, and environmental control.
It's about flavor transfer and moisture retention. You rub the brisket with a spicy salt mix, you brown it hard in a cast iron skillet, and then the long, slow bake is done sealed in foil with a mix of Tabasco and water.
So it's basically steaming itself.
Exactly. The sealed environment steams the brisket, which breaks down all that tough connective tissue and makes it tender without needing any sugary marinades. The browning provides the crust.
Now, beef stroganoff is a challenge because the traditional version is thickened with flour.
And here, the low-carb version relies entirely on sour cream for that creamy, rich texture. The flavor depth comes from Dijon mustard, thyme, and a bit of brandy. But the critical technique, the non-negotiable step, is that the sour cream must be added after the heat is off.
Why is that so important?
If you add sour cream or heavy cream to a hot pan and let it boil, the dairy proteins destabilize and the sauce curdles. It separates. You get a greasy, lumpy mess. It ruins the whole dish.
And we see that same principle in the Bohemian beef dinner.
Yes, exactly. 2 pounds of stew meat simmered for hours with dill, caraway, and paprika. And again, the recipe is explicit. Stir the sour cream in at the very end without boiling to finish the dish. It's served over sauerkraut, which is a naturally low-carb side.
But then we hit a potential snag with the Boston Market-style meatloaf. It uses Parmesan as a binder, which is great, but it also mentions adding flour, and the glaze uses commercial sauces.
This is a crucial moment for anyone reading these recipes critically. The inclusion of flour, even a little, is a compromise. But the real carb danger is in that glaze. Hunt's tomato sauce and Kraft's original barbecue sauce are typically loaded with added sugar.
So that could blow your carb count for the day.
Easily. This is a trade-off. If your goal is pure carb elimination, you have to substitute those. You'd need to make a glaze from scratch. But if your goal is convenience and replicating that specific comfort food flavor, this recipe shows you that flavor often comes at a carbohydrate cost.
Okay, let's talk bulk prep. The basic meat sauce, designed for 5 pounds of beef. It uses carrots, onions, and sugar-free tomato products.
This recipe is the perfect example of hidden carbs, even when you think you're being careful. They use sugar-free tomato puree, which is good, but the sheer volume of carrots, onions, and tomato products in a batch this big means the final carb count is 8 grams per half-cup serving.
Which doesn't sound like a lot.
But if you have a full cup, that's 16 grams. And if you pair it with other vegetables, it adds up fast. It's a critical lesson. Ingredients like onions and tomatoes have natural sugars that you have to track meticulously in large quantities.
Moving to seafood, the bass with avocado sauce has a brilliant, truly zero-carb coating.
Yes, it uses 1/3 of a cup of crushed pork rinds to dredge the fish fillets. Pork rinds are just fried pig skin, pure protein and fat. They give you a perfect, reliable, zero-carb crunch that works exactly like breading.
And the sauce itself is just avocado, heavy cream, lime juice.
Right, no thickeners. It relies on the natural fat and texture of the avocado to give it richness and body.
Okay, the 3 chicken casseroles. They seem to be a masterclass in using creamy dairy and reliable vegetable substitutes.
They really are. The cheesy chicken casserole uses a full pound 16 ounces of mascarpone cheese.
16 ounces.
That is a commitment to richness. Mascarpone is extremely high in butterfat, so the sauce is guaranteed to be incredibly unctuous and satisfying. And the base of the casserole is diced frozen broccoli, the intentional low-carb substitute for pasta.
The chicken and bacon casserole does something similar, but with cauliflower instead of broccoli.
Cauliflower is the true hero vegetable of low-carb cooking, and they're specific. Dice it into hash brown-sized pieces so it blends in seamlessly. The sauce is a classic cream and Parmesan construction, and they use the residual heat to soften the cauliflower perfectly.
And the cheesy Mexican chicken is all about a spice rub.
It's a straightforward, high-flavor method. You rub the chicken with a mix of peppers and garlic seasoning, brown it in butter, then take it off the heat, top it with Monterey Jack cheese and green chilies, and just let the residual heat melt the cheese. Fast, high-flavor, high-fat.
Then we have 2 very aromatic global dishes, the Santés and the curry. The chicken and beef sautés use a really rich cream-based marinade.
A very smart use of fat. The marinade is cream, 5 cloves of garlic, onion, curry powder, cumin. That rich, fatty base helps carry all those aromatic flavors deep into the meat fibers, much better than a water-based marinade would.
And the peanut sauce is made with sugar-free peanut butter.
Yes, which is key to keeping the carbs down while still getting that classic, salty, sweet, nutty profile.
The chicken and coconut milk curry is all about building flavor from scratch.
This one is all about oil-based flavor infusion. They bloom a whole spice bomb. Peppercorns, cloves, cinnamon, cardamom in hot oil first. That process releases all the fat-soluble flavor compounds. Then the thickening comes from pure reduction.
So you just simmer it with the lid off.
For 40 minutes. The water evaporates, the flavors concentrate, and the sauce thickens naturally from the coconut fat. No flour or starch needed.
And finally, the ultimate comfort food hack, chicken and dumplings. The dumpling recipe is so innovative, using a specific keto French bread machine mix.
This is where you have to rely on the proprietary engineering of the low-carb food industry. That specific mix is the only way you're going to get a structure that can hold together in boiling liquid.
A moist, stiff dough.
Exactly. You drop tablespoonfuls into the boiling broth, and the quick setting action of that specialty flour blend allows it to mimic a traditional dumpling without just dissolving into mush.
So what does this all mean? It really feels like the flavor and richness in low-carb cooking comes down to the details in the supporting cast,
Yeah.
The sauces, the sides.
Absolutely. The goal of every single sauce here is to use high-fat, dairy-heavy cream, sour cream, butter to get the thickness and body that flour or cornstarch would normally provide.
Let's look at the cornerstone of that, Alfredo sauce. We have 2 versions, and the difference in technique and carb count is pretty startling.
It really is.
Version 1 have 4 carbs per serving. It uses margarine or butter, 4 cups of whipped cream, onion, and nutmeg. And it needs a 30-minute simmer, stirring constantly.
That first version is a reduction strategy. You have to simmer that huge volume of cream for half an hour to let the water evaporate and concentrate the milk solids and fat. That's how it gets thick. but the onion is likely the culprit for the higher carb count.
Okay, but version 2 is the clean, technical approach. It's much lower at 1.9 carbs per serving. It's just butter, heavy cream, and fresh grated Parmesan.
Version 2 is an emulsification strategy. It's all about creating a stable blend of fat and cheese protein. And the critical instruction, the one you cannot ignore, is do not bring it to a boil after you add the cheese.
Why not?
Because the high heat will cause the whey proteins in the Parmesan to clump up and separate from the fat. You get a tough, lumpy, oily sauce. By keeping the heat gentle, you get a smooth, perfect high-fat sauce. It's a technical feat.
The béarnaise sauce also uses a reduction technique to build flavor first.
Right. It shows how to create a complex flavor profile without starches. You start by boiling down white wine, vinegar, shallots, and tarragon. You concentrate all those flavors, then you strain it, and you gently heat that concentrated liquid with sour cream.
So it's a shortcut to a traditional béarnaise.
It's a simpler, lower-risk version that uses sour cream instead of a tricky egg yolk emulsion. It still comes in at 3.8 carbs, though.
For pure speed, the Blender Hollandaise sauce is just genius. It uses technology to do the work.
It's all about high-speed physics. You've got the egg yolks and lemon juice whipping in the blender, and you slowly pour in hot, bubbly butter in a thin stream. The blender blades create an instant, stable emulsion.
A perfect sauce in minutes.
Exactly. And they even include a crucial troubleshooting tip. If it starts to break, add a tablespoon of hot water while it's still running to re-stabilize the emulsion.
Okay, the two blue cheese dressings show a big difference in carb load, which is a great reminder about volume.
It really is. Version 1 uses a cup of sour cream and has 15 total carbs. Version 2 uses 16 ounces, a full pint of sour cream, and it jumps to 21 total carbs. It's not the cheese, it's the sheer volume of the sour cream base that makes the difference.
And then we get to the ultimate hidden carb offender, which is such a good lesson for our listeners, the brown gravy. It's made from roast drippings and sour cream.
A beautiful low-carb foundation.
And yet the carb count is astronomical, 13.7 grams per cup.
And that high load is almost certainly coming from one place. The 2 tablespoons of Kitchen Bouquet browning sauce.
Which is a commercial product.
A commercial product full of vegetable bases, caramelized sugars, and stabilizers. It completely undermines all the careful work the cook has done. It's a huge warning sign. You have to scrutinize every single processed condiment you use.
Okay, let's finish with the ultimate vegetable replacement. Cauliflower. The cauliflower mashed potatoes are the definitive starch substitution hack.
This is all about texture and flavor deception. You cook frozen cauliflower, drain it well, and then blend it in a processor with butter, chicken bouillon, minced onion, and cream.
And the processor makes it smooth like potatoes.
And the bouillon and butter provide that savory, salty richness that tricks your brain into thinking you're eating mashed potatoes.
We also have baked green beans, which is just all about using fat for flavor.
So simple, so effective. French-style green beans, baked with bacon drippings, crumbled bacon, and beef bouillon. It's pure, rich flavor for only 2.5 net carbs a serving. It proves that rendered animal fat is one of the best flavor carriers you have.
And finally, a really creative appetizer, the basil deviled egg.
A very sophisticated twist on a classic. You pulse fresh, blanched basil leaves and Parmesan cheese with the egg yolks and sugar-free mayo.
Why blanch the basil?
It keeps the color a vibrant green and softens it so it blends smoothly. The Parmesan adds this nutty, salty depth that just elevates a simple appetizer into something really special.
Wow. We have covered so much ground today. From, the technical need for egg white aeration in a sponge roll to the critical difference between 2 ways of making Alfredo sauce. Looking back, the most creative substitutions have to be the crushed pork rinds for breading, the diced cauliflower replacing rice, and using whey protein powder to bulk out the structure of muffins.
And the one design philosophy that ties all of that together is the constant, absolute reliance on high-fat ingredients. Heavy cream, butter, cream cheese. That high-fat foundation is the bedrock of making any of these recipes work.
It also showed that success is often about technical precision, not just swapping ingredients. Like that very specific 308-degree bake for the multigrain bread, or the absolute rule to never boil the Alfredo sauce with the cheese in it.
This is recipe engineering. It's not just cooking.
It really is.
And at the end of the day, the versatility of almond meal across almost every single baked good, from cakes to cheesecakes, really establishes it as the #1 workhorse. It's the foundation of a low-carb kitchen.
So if we look back at this whole collection, what is the single biggest lesson for our listener to take away? I think the most challenging part of low-carb cooking, as these recipes show, isn't just cutting out starch.
No.
It's the difficulty of meticulously managing the total carb load from ingredients you think are totally harmless.
That's the absolute truth. We saw it so clearly in two places. The basic meat sauce, where the sheer volume of onions and carrots drove the carb count up to 8 grams a serving. Volume matters.
And the brown gravy.
And even more dramatically, the brown gravy, where the culprit was almost certainly that commercial kitchen bouquet sauce, contributing a massive 13.7 grams per cup. It proves you have to be suspicious of every processed flavor enhancer.
So that really leaves us with one final kind of provocative thought for you to chew on. Considering the significant hidden carb risks from commercial products and even just using a lot of vegetables, which of these complex recipes presents the highest risk of those hidden carbs? And what is the single most effective, simple swap you could make? Like making a condiment from scratch that could push that total count even lower.
It really encourages you to go back, re-examine those nutritional notes, and apply critical thinking to every single ingredient on the list, especially the ones that seem perfectly innocent.